Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. So as you can see here, we're going to make an elaborate cabinet. It's really too fancy for what it's going to be used for, but we begin by picking through the pile of spalted oak. They're pretty heavy at that length. Here we'll use the rolling miter station to cut these things down for what will begin to be the panels. And there is several. This project will be solid oak, 99% solid oak, with some fancy panel inlays that are made out of poplar. Getting a pretty good pile there. Alright, here we'll take off the ugly and flatten out the boards. On the last pass here, you can see how pretty they're becoming. Sure is some nice stuff. These four will turn into the base. Removing my bridge for the planer. Hooking up dust collection to the jointer. Getting one flat edge on the boards. Did some adjustments to that joiner recently, and man, how it works good now. Here we've got some dry rot on the edge of the board. It runs almost the full length. The table saw will make quick work of that. We'll get rid of that dry rot. Obviously, if we're going to glue these boards together, we can't have that on the edge of the board. My Miles Craft push block. Now here, my old eyes got tired of looking at this indicator that's about 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch above the scale. So, screwdriver and a couple of whacks with a hammer and a Sharpie to brighten up the paint, and I can see much better. Now here's something you just have to put up with if you have a lazy shop buddy in your shop. But we sure do enjoy having him in there. Play hopscotch over him. It gives me a little exercise. And here we're looking to put these pieces together to create the base. He's still laying there after all this noise. Oop, I hit him in the foot. I woke him up. Not too much energy spent there to keep track of me. He's a good boy. Here we're going to begin the first glue up. I use the tape measure behind the clamps to get an even spacing. The rest of it's pretty standard. You've seen glue ups before. Using Titebond 3 to give me a little more time to make sure I get these seams correct. Them clamps sure do work well. And I keep moving the boards up and down as I tighten the clamps until I get a smooth edge. It's kind of an old-timey way of making a panel. I realize some folks use loose tenon joinery, some folks use biscuits, but they were joined this way for many, many years before those techniques were created. And they've worked well for many, many years. Adding too many clamps, really. Here we're using a doweling jig. It's kind of a fancy new tool that I have. I've got some tool reviews on these things, these Miles Craft tools. If you'd like to check those out, there's some videos I have. The beauty of this tool is that it drills the holes while the boards are locked together, so alignment is perfect. This one here is the base, so we're not worried too much about that check running down the center of the board. You won't see that once the carcass and the body of the cabinet are assembled together. That'll be inside. Nonetheless, I'll fill it with CA glue so that it's stable. Here we've got a problem with the board. Again, we'll throw some blue tape on each side use CA glue as if it was epoxy, and we'll fill it in. I'm going to cut the majority of this boo-boo off. So the reality here is that the glue is to hold everything together more than to fill in this gap. We'll take it over to the table saw and slice that notch off. As you can see, we didn't fill the entire thing. We just stabilized the crack. That oak's pretty stuff though. And here you can see no more notch in the wood. If you don't have one of these dial gauges, I highly recommend that you get yourself one. They make setting gauges so easy. Here we're working on the base. We're going to do a miter on one front edge of the base and a square joint on the back end. We'll put some dowel pins in the square end on the end of this. But of course we have to have a matching miter on the front edge. And this is what we're looking at. Miter front, square back. Now we're going to need to pretty up the front of that base a little bit, and we'll do that here in just a second. First we're going to mark out for our pins. Aligning the edge of the board to the marks to get my depth. Those several hash marks told me where center of the board was. Use an awl and a doweling jig punches the holes. Actually, the drill punches the holes. The doweling jig holds it square. And here we're going to make a design so that we can make this look nicer on the front. I'm using a 1-2-3 block to create a straight line across at 1 inch high. Using a depth gauge to determine that depth off of the fence of the saw. Cutting a scrap piece of plywood to test and be sure that I'm going to be in the right spot. And I nailed it on the first try. Doing a plunge cut here. And back over to the bandsaw to take out the corner. And create a foot on the front bar. Something like that. Adds just an element of fancy to the front end. I could have left it square, but by having the feet on there, it also eliminates the rocking action of the base. This is the fence we're putting back on the CNC. We're going to have 3 fancy panels that we're going to put in the doors. Here I'm going to change this blade to a wider blade. Never hurts to take the vacuum to your saws and clean things up. That Rikon has become an indispensable part of my shop for sure. I'm going to use a 3/4 inch blade here. Put the blade in, and we'll have to make all the adjustments to get everything correct again. When I used to do this on the Craftsman saw, it would take me an hour to get things set up the way it needed to be. This took a matter of about 15 minutes. My clamp wasn't long enough, so we'll remove the end of the clamp and put a bigger pipe on it. That's the beauty of pipe clamps. You can get longer clamps by simply buying another pipe or making your own pipe longer. I needed to reach from one end of the base to the other. Easily done. We'll put on some yellow goop, put the dowel pins in, squeeze the back together. Now these are corner clamp attachments that I've made here. You put these on each side of the board you're trying to clamp together on a 45, and then you'll add one more clamp to the center notch and it pulls them together perfectly. Some more yellow goop. Another clamp. And you have a perfect corner. Take this thing and set it aside. And trip over it 6 or 7 times while we're doing something else. Take the clamps off of the top. Put the clamps over on the other panels for the sides. Almost had that clamp fall on my foot. Remove the clamps from the base. Spend 30-40 minutes getting the glue out of this brush. After this, I began using some water and cleaning the brush up because it just takes too long. It's too much messing around. It is satisfying though, removing that thing. Alright, now we'll glue up the side panels. Again, solid oak. You always want to do a dry test glue up before you start putting the yellow goop on things. Same process as before, evening up the edges until they're smooth. This is why I put the 3/4 inch blade in the bandsaw. I wanted to slice these off and make them thinner and not have to run them through the planer 100 more times than necessary. These are the door pieces. Hey, there's my helper again. He's always next to me making sure I'm doing things right. I tried to get him to play with that thing and he said, nope, no dice. Now here, this is the only portion of the cabinet that is not solid oak. Those are pine slats, 1/2 inch thick. And what I'm doing is putting on a face piece that is 3/4 inch thick and gluing it on the front to make up the difference in thickness. This is one of the inset panels for the doors. I'm drilling the holes in the sides to hold the panel down on the CNC. I've determined that screws on the CNC hold down better than any other clamps. So just oversize your material, your stock, screw it to the bed, and it will stay right where you want it. Easy peasy. We'll surface these boards first to make sure that they are nice and flat and uniform. And then we'll let the machine do its magic after that. Now each one of these carves with the surfacing took 4 hours. Surfacing was about 20 minutes. The remainder was done actually doing the carve and making the pretty. Using my overhead camera trolley for this shot. I haven't used that in quite a while. It's kind of a fun little thing. I also have a video on that if you're interested in how I made that. That's been hanging from my shop ceiling for quite some time. He likes to come over when the camera's running and bump the camera, so you have to keep a watchful eye on him. For some reason, he enjoys going between the legs of that tripod. Alright, the surfacing is done, so we run the sander over nice and flat and steady, just to clean off any lines, and now we'll begin doing the magic. I used an 1/8 inch for a roughing bit, 1/8 inch flat end mill. And when this finishes, we'll be putting in an Amana 90-degree V-bit, and as you can see, 3 hours, 24 minutes. That's why I'm doing a lot of voiceover in this video, because that thing is way too loud to try and talk in the camera while that thing is running. Alright, time to switch bits. That PWNCNC dust boot does an extremely good job. I'll leave a link to PWNCNC in the end of the video, or in the video description, I should say. I have to make a correction here. I did not use the Amana bit on this one. I used a standard 60-degree V-bit. It sure did come out clean though. Looks pretty sharp. Here we have a knot that we're going to stabilize again with CA glue, 2P10, some activator, and put a couple of coats on there until that knot does not move. Be careful not to glue your finger to the knot. Here I'm applying tape to the drill bit so that I don't go too deep and go through the board. I'm going to recess the screws in the base into the top of the base from the bottom side, so the screws are definitely hidden. We'll clamp it in place once we make sure that we have it equal distant on all sides. Rubber hammer and a little bit of adjustment, and we have it. Screws in and screw it down. I'm not too concerned about warpage and expansion and contraction of the lumber because I've oversized the holes to allow for room with the screws, and the feet are not glued to the base. Looking pretty good. Cutting the side panels to length. Taking a Sharpie and marking where them feet need to fall, and we'll remove them so that I can also screw the side panels on from the bottom side. Using some supports here to ensure that they are 90 degrees while the glue is setting. And what do you do while glue is setting? Smile and twiddle your thumbs, because that's about all you can do. Play with your glue bottle. Or whistle a nice tune. Alright, back to work. Now I'm going to turn this piece here into, I guess you would call it the face frame between the panels, although this project does not have an actual face frame. The design does not call for it. We cut it into 3 pieces, and they will go right here on the front. Squaring up one edge using a 1, 2, 3 block for a spacer. Perfect 90. And in between it goes. Now to put these in, we're going to use pocket holes and some glue. I have the cabinet elevated with these other blocks, and they serve two purposes. They hold the piece that we're putting in at the right height, and they allow hands-free clamping for the most part. Otherwise, they would fall through and not be flush on the face. Again, we're going to use the long clamp to squeeze the centerpiece in and use pocket holes to put it in place until the glue dries. And finally, we have got these guys complete. So now we have, oh, I missed that screw. We have triplets. 3 identical door inserts. Woohoo! I don't have to hear that thing screaming anymore for a while. Ah! And it's starting to get heavy enough now that I think it's time to put it on the floor before I can't get it down there by myself. Let's see, this is bottom, obviously. This is back, that's front. Trying to line up the screws. We're not going to glue this base on. We're going to lose our drill. Oh, I found it. I don't like to use the impact on these because you can't gauge how much power you're putting into the drill. Hence the clutch on this one. Let's make sure we're in line. The helper is pushing through. Boy. Am I doing it right? Yeah! Now we'll proceed to flip it over and get a hernia. We had a blowout right there. A little glue and some clamp, and we got it fixed. Now, of course, I do have to put the top on it. That's starting to look like something. I realized while editing this video that I had a tremendous amount of footage. And I thought, this definitely needs to be broken into 2 videos. I want to thank everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, if you haven't by now, please like and subscribe. I hope you got something out of the video, and stay tuned next week for part 2 when I finish this beautiful, beautiful cabinet. Again, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll catch you on the next one.